This is the Laowa 10mm f4, aka the cookie lens they're calling it. It's an APS-C lens, so about 15mm full frame equivalent focal length. The one I have here is for the Fuji X mount, but it's also available on the Canon RF, Nikon Z, Sony E mount, and the Leica L mount as well, and it also comes in silver. I love shooting with ultra-wide lenses. I mean, it's not that useful for portraits and things like that, but there's something about being able to capture everything that you see and the dynamic composition that you get from them to tell the story that is really fun. And of course, it's not just for the fun, it can be incredibly useful for things like real estate or architecture, and of course, landscapes. If you take a look at the hardware, you can see why they call this lens the cookie lens. It's a very small lens with manual focus and aperture rings with a 37mm filter thread. The focus ring turns very smoothly and the aperture ring has these nice clicks on every stop. I thought that would be a bit annoying for video, but because this is a manual lens, even with the full stop increments, the light change seemed very smooth. But this lens does have some focus breathing, which is very noticeable at this focal length. For such a small lens, the build quality seems very nice like any other Laowa lenses. It feels very dense and the design looks very good on this Fuji camera as well. One thing you have to be aware of, because this is such a small lens, you have to be very mindful of where your finger is when you focus, so your photos don't look like your parents' smartphone photos. In terms of optics, the lens is very sharp all around the frame, but it seems to slightly lack contrast in general. And there's very little distortion, but quite a bit of vignetting. And as you stop it down, it gets a bit better, but it never completely goes away. One thing I do really like about this lens is that this lens has a very short minimum focusing distance of 3.9 inches or 10 centimeters. And even with such a wide focal length at f4, you can get some decent background blur at close range. The lens handles flares okay. It does get a bit busy sometimes, but the image maintains the contrast very well, and the flares kind of have an interesting look to them. And there's practically zero color fringing, which is a big bonus. I mean, because this is such a small lens, I keep expecting to find a lot of flaws on the images, but that just doesn't seem to be the case, which is nice. So overall, this is an extremely fun lens with compact size and beautiful build quality. I'll say about the only downside is the heavy vignetting, but that's pretty easy to fix, and for $299, it's not exactly cheap for a manual focus lens, but it's not outrageously expensive either, and I think you definitely get the quality for the price. So for that reason, I would highly recommend this lens.